Cayman,
Yes, sir.
I've been rambling.
Mm.
I've been waxing poetic, some might say.
Mm.
But it's not stopping here because we got some Last of Us Season 2 updates from Nelly Andriva at Deadline. Last of Us, a show that we covered a ton on this show, and our Once Upon a Time sister podcast, Spotlight TV, where we reviewed Season 1, which I would think will be back if Season 2 ever happens, but that's what we're going to talk about right now. Nelly Andriva writes, HBO's Emmy-nominated The Last of Us was renewed in January, shortly after the adaptation of the most popular PlayStation video game premiered, quickly becoming a pop culture phenom. By May 1, when the writer's strike began and script work was put on hold, the new season had already taken shape. The Last of Us co-creator and executive producer Craig Mazin told Deadline in an interview tied to the series' big showing on Emmy nominations day, confirming the new writers who had joined him and fellow co-creator / EP the game's Neil Druckmann for season 2. Quote, we got pretty far, actually. We were doing great, Mazin said. Neil and I had been sitting and talking with Hallie Gross, who also worked on the second game as a writer, and Bo Shim, the new writer that was in our little tiny room with us. Obviously not a mini room because we're greenlit we're a real show, and because I hate that mini room stuff, end quote. Ending the fraught practice of mini rooms, heavily employed by streamers for series ahead of greenlight and renewal, is amongst the list of demands the WGA has been pursuing in its contract negotiations with the studios. Mazin revealed that episode 201, the premiere of season 2, has been written. Quote, we know what the whole season is, and I was actually able to get a write and submit the first episode right before the deadline hit, he said. So now I'm just walking around kind of brain writing, I guess, which I don't think is scabbing, which, sidebar, in case you don't know, scabbing is crossing the picket line during a strike. I take walks and I think through the scenes because when the bell rings and this is over, because the companies have finally come to their senses, I'm going to have to basically shoot myself out of a cannon because we really want to try and get this show on the air when it's supposed to be on the air, end quote. In the interview with Deadline, or in an interview in Deadline with Deadline in May, there we go, third time's the charm, HBO head of drama Francesca Orsi said that the expectation for The Last of Us is to return sometime in 2025. 2.5 months into the writer's strike and a day into an actor's strike, there is still possibility for season 2 to make its original delivery date, Mazin said. Last quote for now. We had a little more flexibility, I think, than normal, just because we had to wait a little bit longer anyway to line up production with the weather. A lot of what we do is outside, and so we had a schedule that weirdly hasn't been immediately impacted, but we're getting pretty close. We can't keep our original start dates forever, obviously, he said. If these strikes go much longer, we inevitably will have to push, and that hurts us, and it hurts the audience, and it hurts HBO. Everybody wants to get back to work. I think everybody that's actually doing the work, including the network people who are with us on the ground, I think everybody just wants to get this solved. So fingers crossed. Cayman, I come to you with this long story with more color we can bring in if we want. But some key things I think I wanted to discuss here. One, them saying that their goal is 2025, 2 years from now, which I think would make sense. Like the season ended, 4 months ago? 2 years makes sense with kind of today's model of this kind of prestige television.
Yeah.
But the actor strike just started. My question to you, do you think 2025 is a stretch, or do you think it's possible for us to actually see season 2 of this by that time?
Patrick, I struggle with answering this question mainly because historically speaking, I'm not a big TV guy. I'm very much a movie guy. However, with that being said, I do understand a little bit about how this works, being such a big movie guy, and understand something like The Last of Us, because you have to think like a normal movie is about an hour 30 minutes to an hour 45. That's kind of, I think, kind of the staple at this point.
For sure.
Obviously, movies can be longer, and we historically have said before we prefer movies 75 minutes.
Yes.
Yes.
In and out.
But with a TV show, you have to think how many more moving parts take place. With a movie, it's more relative, more focused. You're not going to have this like huge breadth of scale Some movies will, obviously, but for the most part, they're more contained, right? With a television show, though, so especially something like The Last of Us, which has multiple locales over multiple seasons, things like that, and they have to work that in. That's really tough. That's incredibly tough. And you're also balancing a cast and crew that is much larger than a normal movie would be, unless you're maybe Marvel or DC. With that being said, I don't think 2025 is probably going to hit.
I don't think so either.
And I say that even more so under the scope of this is prestige. This is not some independent shit, small scale, where maybe these actors aren't part of some of these large, like SAG or AFTRA. And so because of that, this strike, and I think that's probably where we need to start here. This strike is not, I think, like the last strike we had.
Correct.
This is much, much bigger. Because bigger. the first strike, and this is, you'd have to go back a ways. I think it was correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 2012 maybe. Fact check me. But either way, that's
talking writers or actors.
The just original writer strike. Which was one of the largest entertainment strikes I think we've ever had there's probably some back in the day.
2008 was the last one.
That was close. 4 year margin of error. So either way, so I think the thing is that the way that functioned, it was just the writers. This time is the first time in I don't know how many decades that writers and actors both are striking at the same time.
I think the last time it happened was the 60s.
Yes. Okay. So that'll just tell you. So the magnitude of scale of this is not unprecedented, but we haven't done this in a long time.
Yeah. Last time they both struck was when residuals became a thing. So that, a pretty fucking huge change to the industry. So that's kind of what they're hoping for this time too.
So just kind of give some ballpark idea of what we're dealing with. When the writer's strike took place in 2008, as we just uncovered, the thing was they actually brought in non-union writers to write. So we still got stuff. This is very different now.
Right.
Almost all of Hollywood is on standstill.
Right.
And it's going to be a war of attrition.
Yeah.
And so I think if you fundamentally understand how this works, you have people who are living paycheck to paycheck who are going on strike compared to these massive Hollywood studios that can't release anything until people want to work again.
Right.
And even a movie normally takes 1.5 years, give or take, for it to come to fruition, unless you're something like The Flash that took 8 years from start to finish. But I think the problem we run into here, Patrick, is I don't know when this is going to end.
Yeah.
And I think that's the scary part if you're both sides.
Sure.
Honestly, don't give a flying fuck about these studios. I really don't care about them.
They can burn.
The people being affected by the shit that they're trying to pull, fucking Netflix is oh yeah, we'll pay you $150 to scan your face and use it as an extra in the background in CGI is ludicrous to me.
Yeah, I will be so shocked if this comes out by 2025.
Yeah.
I think that we are in this for the long haul, this strike. And because there was a response last night from the studio executives, or the studio side of this discussion, kind of replying to this first set of asks, just down the whole line, rejecting everything.
Just fucking
when you read the things that were being asked for, it's you are evil for saying no to this. And I think it seems, I've talked about before, my previous life was in the acting world, but I was almost entirely in theater, not in film. So I was never union. I never really was in front of a screen very much at all, or in front of a camera very much at all. So my knowledge base is not that much higher than the average person on this topic. But I'm friends with a lot of people that are in the union, and that were at this rally in Atlanta last night. And so I've been seeing a lot like on social media today, and them kind of sharing what they've been kind of receiving from the top down, and it's like fucking disgusting.
Yeah,
the things that are being denied. So I don't know, man. Like I think this is going to be going for a while, and it's going to kind of trickle. And then there's the question of like, okay, let's say this goes on for 6 months. What even survives? I think Last of Us would survive, but I think there's a lot of shit that wouldn't survive. And I would even think that there's a lot of people who just like leave the industry. So yeah, it's a really kind of interesting kind of place that we're in. But I thought it was interesting, kind of going back to the article a little bit, going back to something that Craig Mazin said, talking about they already weren't planning on filming for a bit because of weather, which kind of, put me in the mindset of The Last of Us. They're probably waiting for winter time because a lot of that game takes place during winter. So like there is that kind of cushion at least. But I do not expect this to be done by the time we get to winter. And even if it was done by the time we got to winter, it's going to take time to ramp up again. Like
in post, I mean, there's so much that goes into the shit. I would say 2026 release window sounds more realistic to me, barring any additional setbacks that could occur. I mean, I honestly, I feel like there's going to be a strike coming up soon from like unionizing like our special effects studios.
Yeah,
because like those people are mistreated as hell.
Yeah.
So like once you take that into consideration, if you just set aside any additional setbacks, like 2026 seems more reasonable. And honestly, I think the one thing that The Last of Us has going for them that maybe other shows don't is that if they do a traditional, like if they go the way the games are, there's a decent gap, right? So they already had worked on like de-aging Ellie for the show, the actor Bella Ramsey. They de-aged her for the show, but the thing is, there's still an age gap, and if you see her now, she still doesn't look like that much older.
Yeah.
So like honestly, it kind of works in their benefit, and you get an older Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, you get an older Tommy. That's a really good point. Part of me too, like the other piece of this that I as I was like thinking through, like what are all of the kind of the different tendrils that this creates, no pun intended, with this strike. And I was like, oh, what if like some of the actors just like don't want to do this anymore? I don't think that that's going to be the case for The Last of Us though, because just as a quick shout out, last week when this kind of first was going live, Last of Us got 24 Emmy nominations, a lot of them in the acting categories. Basically everyone that had more than like 5 lines in the show got an Emmy nomination, and a bunch of special effects, bunch of directing, writing, all that shit. So pretty cool. I mean, definitely the most successful anything in terms of nominations from the video game world by a fucking country mile.
There is something I do want to point out, Patrick, before we move on to the next story.
Yes.
I was looking up, and the way that the Actors Guild and unions work and the Writers Guild unions work, they are separate entities from video games. So impact wise, unless they join on in a strike, right now it seems like for video games, at least in this regard, with like voice acting and writing and stuff like that, because they're very much like more insular, at least for the writing side. And then with the voice acting, the community is very different. It is looking like there'll probably be little to no impact, at least video game side, unless we see that side, which the video game voice acting community, they went on strike for, it didn't last very long, but they had a strike a few years back.
Yeah, that's a good point too. What if we end up seeing, I think this would probably violate the terms of the strike, but I wonder if we all of a sudden start seeing just like a bunch of A-listers doing video games for a little extra money. I mean, they don't need the money, the A-listers. The strike isn't about the A-listers. The strike is about the people that I know personally that are being mistreated. Also, quick little thing before we move on from The Last of Us. Did you see this other story? Won't read the full thing because I didn't bring it, but Gustavo Santaolalla, the composer, was on a podcast in Spanish talking about the game, and apparently basically let the cat out of the bag that they're planning on re-releasing part 2.
Yeah,
in some capacity.
Which I'm not shocked at all by.
I'm not shocked at all by either. I think what I do want to know is it just like totally just like a re-release, throw PS5 on there on the box, and like frame rates maybe a little better, or like are they redoing shit? Because in the interview he talked about something that I had completely missed, and all the times that I played the game, he makes a cameo appearance in Jackson of the second game, playing a banjo.
What?
And apparently the reason that he let this slip is that he said they're expanding his role in the remaster. And so like the speculation is that like maybe you can walk up to him and like hear him play more things and like interact with him that way. Like I doubt he's gonna be fucking going on the road with you,
dude. That'd be so good. He just always in the background, just playing a guitar. You're getting attacked, just fucking slamming that Spanish guitar.
It wouldn't surprise me though, like if with factions seemingly being in kind of development hell, Naughty Dog's gonna want to make a little bit of money.
Yeah, they gotta have something.
So I think a re-release of part 2, just another fucking excuse for me to buy this fucking game. But I'm gonna do it because I'm a sucker.
You are a sucker for sure.
I'm a big old sucker.